Russian soldiers are chasing a scientist. With the hounds on his trail, the scientist has nowhere to escape. He throws a mysterious device into the sea.
Не подобает человеку играть роль.
However, that mysterious device sends strange sound waves into the ocean. Years later, Captain John of a research vessel takes those who preach environmental protection to a mountain of ocean garbage to provide more material for their campaign. An unexpected incident quietly unfolds during this voyage. While sailing, the biologist Rhett and his assistant Noah on board have been using sonar to listen for underwater information. It seems they are searching for something. John vaguely senses something is wrong but says nothing. He is just the captain. Moreover, John has more important matters to attend to. John noticed that since the research vessel set sail, a small boat has been following the research vessel from a distance. Most importantly, the research vessel's route is not a public navigation path. It is nearly impossible to encounter another vessel. Clearly, they are not friendly, given the way they are following. John suspects there may be an infiltrator on board. Therefore, he instructs his assistant Sal to retrieve the crew members' information. John wants to review it carefully. Meanwhile, Rhett and Noah, listening underwater, actually discover some anomalies. They accidentally receive a very strange sound wave. It has clear signs of being artificially produced, so Noah immediately begins to analyze the content of the sound wave. He discovers that it is encrypted information. To uncover its content, Noah tries various methods to decrypt the sound wave. This is a lengthy process that takes at least 8 hours. Noah falls asleep nearby. When he wakes up the next day, the sound wave has been decrypted. Inside are several experimental videos. Noah opens it to find that it is in Russian. On the screen, a Russian researcher stated that they are conducting life extension experiments on an island near Nemo Point and have achieved certain results. The experiment used 2 groups of short-lived insects. The group on the left dies completely within 24 hours. Burr on the right are the specially modified insects. Even after 30 days, they have hardly any losses. Noah is very surprised. He became curious about this technology and was just about to check out other experimental videos when he was suddenly interrupted by the biologist Rhett. Rhett informed him that Captain John has summoned everyone to the dining room. Noah puts down the video and heads to the dining room. There, he learns that the research vessel is being targeted by a group of pirates. John gives orders to everyone in the dining room. He plans to use his extensive experience to shake off the pirates, but John is miscalculating. The reason they have been following the research vessel is that there is a saboteur among the passengers. There is a photographer on board named Mark. In his room, there is a backpack with a glowing green box. Inside is a global positioning system. That is why the pirates have been able to follow closely. However, Mark is not an infiltrator for the pirates. In fact, the pirates are not the ones he intended to attract. Mark is being threatened by a mob boss from his hometown. For certain reasons, he seizes the opportunity to smuggle a priceless gem for the mob, using the research vessel. Since the items on the research vessel won't be checked by customs, Mark agrees to this arrangement. To ensure that the item won't be lost, the mob boss installs a GPS device on the box containing the gem. It also has corresponding sensors. If the box is opened during transport, or if there are any other accidents, the mob boss will immediately kill Mark's family in Spain. For some reason, the pirates learn about the gem, and they track the location information emitted by the box, which is why they have been following the research vessel. Mark knows that this situation is all because of him, but he dares not reveal it to the others. He can only hide the box containing the gem, hoping to evade the pirates' search. With Mark's GPS tracking, the research vessel can't shake off the pirates at all. Soon after, the pirates board the research vessel. Given their heavy firepower, the first thing they say is to hand over the gem. John is taken aback upon hearing this. He has no idea what gem they are talking about, and thinks the pirates must be mistaken. Seeing that they are being uncooperative, the pirates press the gun against John's head. Assistant Sal quickly suggests that perhaps others on the ship might know. Thus, the pirates brought all the others here, and forced them to reveal the whereabouts of the gem. Faced with this threat, Mark remains silent. Just as the pirates are about to take action, suddenly, a voice comes through their walkie-talkie. A pirate seems to have encountered an attack. The pirate leader immediately leads his men to assist. Only 2 or 3 remain to guard John and the others. However, the pirate leader doesn't stay away for long before returning. But this time, he is brought back under control. It turns out that the earlier communication was sent by the ship's mechanic, William. With his help, they manage to subdue the pirates. However, they don't kill them. They simply toss them back onto the pirate boat and confiscate their weapons. How could the pirate chief give up so easily? But before seeking revenge, he must first contact his employer by phone. His employer is also a mob boss. Through their conversation, it is revealed that he is the true owner of the gem, the one who previously tasked Mark with smuggling the gem. was merely a subordinate of his. Now, the mob boss has executed the traitor. He learned about the GPS device from the traitor's confession. This is why he arranged for the pirates to track the research vessel. The mob boss is very angry about the pirate leader's failure. He states that he will give him one last chance. If he fails again, the traitor will be his fate. Listening to the boss's furious roar, the pirate leader prepares to ensure success next time. Meanwhile, the crew of the research vessel is unaware that they are being targeted by pirates again. They are currently feeling a headache from the news they just received. According to the Oceanic Administration's report, a major storm will appear along their sailing route. Their voyage will be severely affected. After a brief consideration, John redraws a new sailing route. Before they have gone far, they find that the pirates have returned. Given the previous encounter, John knows he can't shake these pirates off, so he decides to take a risk and return to the original route, and charges into the storm zone. The pirates are unprepared and can't withstand the storm's power. In the end, it turns out exactly as John predicted. The pirates can only watch from outside the storm zone as they leave. Having finally resolved this crisis, the crew on the ship immediately relaxes. They dive back into their work. Among them, Noah immediately returns to his room and checks the other experimental videos. He is filled with curiosity about this mysterious experiment. The video doesn't detail the specifics of the research. Instead, it discusses the location of their experiments. From this, Noah learns the name Nemo Point. He also discovers the exact coordinates. However, at the video's end, that researcher warned the viewers never to go to that mysterious island. Anyone who comes into contact will be directly erased. Even the associated researchers can't escape this fate. In reality, this researcher was shot by the Russian military years ago. After leaving this information, however, the warning doesn't deter Noah. Noah secretly hacks into the research vessel's system. He then changes the sailing target to the location of Nemo Point. No one noticed anything throughout the entire process, and even more coincidentally, because of their earlier risky maneuver through the storm zone, some of the ship's electronic systems were damaged. They couldn't accurately determine their current location. As a result, the research vessel had drifted over 200 kilometers off course, without anyone realizing it. Although John sensed that the current waters were different from where they had sailed before, he couldn't imagine that the vessel's navigation system had been altered. All he could do was ask the mechanic, William, to quickly repair the damaged systems on the research vessel. However, before William could finish the repairs, they had already arrived near Nemo Point. The unprepared research vessel crashed into nearby rocks. It was only then that John and the others realized they had come to an unfamiliar island. They took a rough look at the situation on the island through binoculars, and saw the defensive works that Russia had built here before, including the sturdy gun emplacements and fortresses. Although John didn't know where this was, he guessed there was likely someone there, so he took some crew members to land on the island. However, as they delved deeper, John's heart grew increasingly disappointed. The gate here was rusty, and the writing on the walls was still in Russian. It was clearly an abandoned Russian fortress. The only silver lining was that the guard, Ryan, and his companions discovered a radio station above the fortress. Inside were various pieces of equipment. It appeared to be undamaged. If they could find a way to restore power, they might be able to send a distress signal to the outside world, because their ship, after being checked by mechanic William, had sustained a deep crack from the collision with the rocks, and couldn't continue sailing. Any further mishap could lead to it sinking immediately. John and his assistant Sal primarily searched the interior of the fortress. However, they found nothing. At this moment, a voice suddenly came through the walkie-talkie. Reporter Lucia and the ship's doctor have made a new discovery on the hillside, but it is not good news. Instead, they saw numerous human corpses. A quick examination confirmed that these people had all been burned. Lucia speculated that the Russians might have conducted forbidden biological experiments here. That is why they needed to dispose of the bodies by burning them. However, the ship's doctor professionally refuted Lucia's claim. As for why these people were burned, the doctor couldn't provide an answer at that time. She could only take a skull back to the ship to analyze and investigate with the equipment there. When the others returned, they shared their findings and analyses with one another. Through various investigations, the ship's doctor discovered that the bones seemed to have been normally cremated. However, such a large-scale incineration is not reasonable in itself. Moreover, there were signs of a struggle on them. She could only deduce that perhaps these were the bodies of enemies. However, Assistant Sal believed that this place used to be a Russian prison. It was specifically for exiling the most notorious criminals. The burned bodies were those of imprisoned convicts. Regardless, this proves that this is not a safe place. Perhaps they would be trapped here to die. Mechanic William stated that he had already repaired some parts of the ship. Once he repaired a bit more, they should be able to attempt to set sail again. This was undoubtedly the best news for everyone at that moment. However, Captain John's face was filled with concern. He keenly sensed that everything had been too coincidental along the way. Perhaps some of the people among them had orchestrated the grounding incident. That night, John kept reviewing everyone's identity records, and indeed found some issues. The biologist Rhett's assistant, Noah, is a member of an extremist cult. Their belief system holds that only by exterminating all humanity can the environment be protected. In a way, he is a terrorist. Sure enough, on the night they learned that they would soon be leaving, the research vessel experienced another mishap. The drainage system on the ship suddenly malfunctioned. While inspecting, mechanic William found that the wires of the drainage system had been deliberately cut. Due to this sabotage, the research vessel suffered severe damage and could no longer be repaired. It would completely sink soon. The crew heard this terrible news and began to discuss and condemn the saboteur. Although Captain John said nothing, he kept his gaze fixed on Noah. It was clear that John had an answer in mind, but due to a lack of sufficient evidence, Noah also sensed John's scrutiny. However, he didn't show any signs of guilt. It seemed that everything was unrelated to him. A moment later, Captain John called for everyone to stop. He instructed everyone to transfer as much of the supplies from the ship to the island as possible. With everyone's teamwork, the items were almost completely moved in no time, but at this moment, someone noticed that the chef was missing. John speculated that he might have had an accident on the ship. Ignoring the others' objections, he dove into the tilting research vessel. John searched for the chef, racing against time. Finally, he managed to find the injured and unconscious chef in the kitchen. He lifted him and made his way outside. But before they could completely escape, the research vessel could no longer hold up. It ultimately sank completely into the sea. On the escape boat, everyone anxiously watched the spot where the ship sank, praying that John would return safely. Perhaps heaven heard their wishes. As a splash of water erupted, Captain John and the chef actually emerged from the water. Later, through conversation, it was learned that he had intended to take some canned goods from the kitchen when the ship suddenly shook, causing him to crash into the can rack. This was what caused him to lose consciousness. Fortunately, John woke him just in time. After hearing the chef's account of what happened, John finally breathed a sigh of relief. Later, the group found a cave on the island to use as a temporary base. However, they had not been inside long when influencer Lisa and another crew member accidentally discovered the power source of the fortress. With their efforts, the entire base was brought back online. The group now had a more suitable place to stay. Before they could celebrate, they learned that their companions exploring the cave were in trouble. In the deep cave, guard Ryan had cut his arm on a sharp rock. The scent of blood attracted some unknown creature. They didn't see the entity, but heard some strange noises instead. Then Ryan was bitten by some creature. After a moment, he felt weak and dizzy all over. Seeing this, the others began shooting wildly around them, scaring off the mysterious creature that attacked. They quickly pulled Ryan out of the cave. After hearing the news, the ship's doctor assessed Ryan's injuries. Looking at the grotesque bite mark, the doctor couldn't identify what kind of creature it was. He could only perform basic antibacterial treatment for now. Then he requested John and the others to find the mysterious creature. Only then could they treat the wound properly. Upon hearing this, John's expression became very serious. But for now, this is the only way. Before the investigation results could come in, a new incident occurred again. After Ryan woke up, he confronted the cult fanatic, Noah. Ryan somehow knew Noah's hidden identity. He believed that everything happening now was the fault of this cult lunatic. Ryan refused to listen to Noah's defense at all. He immediately aimed to teach him a lesson. The doctor noticed the situation and quickly stepped in to stop Ryan. However, Ryan was extremely violent and didn't heed any warnings. He even turned on the doctor. Fortunately, he was still injured and fell unconscious. However, Ryan's unusual behavior raised some suspicions in the doctor. Ryan had never acted like this before. His recent behavior resembled rabies. After an examination, they indeed found some strange changes at the site of Ryan's bite. The group that ventured deep into the cave to find the mysterious creature was very cautious due to Ryan's prior experience. However, after walking a long way, they found no creatures. Instead, they discovered several white eggs. The biologist, Rhett, was also in the team. After a brief examination, she confirmed that these were eggs of some large reptile. Then the strange sound echoed again. The iguana seemed to want to protect the eggs on the ground. The situation was now very clear. This creature was the one that bit Ryan. They immediately killed the iguana and brought it back to the fortress base. Meanwhile, influencer Lisa discovered something new. While exploring the fortress, she stumbled upon a wall that seemed very out of place. It also had a mysterious button installed on it. Lisa bravely pressed the button, but nothing happened. Then, Lisa carefully examined the wires connected to the button. She discovered that it appeared to connect to a different area on the other side of the wall. Then Lisa realized that the wall was actually hollow. She quickly reported her findings to Captain John and the others. When everyone arrived, they smashed the wall open and found that there was indeed something extraordinary inside. Behind the wall was actually an elevator. Driven by curiosity, the group took the elevator down to the underground area of the fortress. There, they discovered it was a vast laboratory. The walls were adorned with many photographs of Russian astronauts. Clearly, the research was related to their space program. The laboratory area contained many medical facilities, and even well-preserved plasma. The group suspected that the Russians' original experiments were biological in nature. The main computer that recorded experimental data had been formatted, making it impossible to find any useful clues for the time being. In addition, they found construction blueprints for the fortress laboratory in the underground area. From these, they learned that the fortress was built over 20 years ago, utilizing geothermal energy for power generation. That is why they were able to restore the fortress's power system after connecting the circuit breaker. However, among the blueprints was a map of the island and its surroundings, with some inexplicable markings that were completely unclear in meaning. Noah and biologist Rhett made new discoveries. During their monitoring in the past few days, they discovered a new sonic frequency in the ocean, which was entirely different from the previous video. Noah noticed that this peculiar audio frequency had also appeared the night before the research vessel sank. At that time, it was accompanied by the sound of metal clashing, resembling the sound of a ship's anchor rattling, as if something was trying to climb up the research vessel along the anchor chain. If that is the case, then the danger level on the island will far exceed what the group imagines. When night fell and everyone returned to the base, Rhett and Noah were just about to explain today's findings, when reporter Lucia suddenly started causing a scene. She knew everyone was trapped on the island, that food had to be carefully rationed, yet she still was picky. She thought the dinner was not to her taste, and knocked it to the ground. Then she demanded the chef make another serving. Captain John once again explained the current situation to her. Food was extremely scarce, and each person was allotted only one portion. Reporter Lucia believed that they were deliberately making things difficult for her. Seeing that Lucia remained unyielding, Captain John had to explain the situation to the others in the dining area again. If they didn't receive help before the food ran out, they would all be trapped to die here. John's words caused some people to feel panic, with photographer Mark being one of them. He still had a smuggling job to complete, and absolutely cannot be trapped here. So after a night of contemplation, he took the box containing the gem, and prepared to pilot the only lifeboat to escape the island. However, before Mark could leave, Assistant Sal discovered his plan. He immediately fired a shot to stop Mark. Then, under questioning from the group, Mark revealed the details about the gem. John pondered this thoughtfully. However, influencer Lisa completely disbelieved Mark's words, but right now, they needed to deal with that glowing green box quickly, otherwise, the pirates would soon come after them again. John thought of a very simple solution. He wrapped the box in kitchen foil, trying to block the signal transmission, using the principle of a Faraday cage. Then, he hid the wrapped box in a corner of the kitchen. But what John didn't know was that the previously unpleasant Lucia had been secretly watching him, and she would later pull everyone into danger. At this time, Ryan's arm had already suffered extensive necrosis and mutation, looking as if it had been affected by some kind of potent toxin. However, biologist Rhett was very certain that iguanas of this species were non-venomous. Moreover, they were not bloodthirsty. They shouldn't be attracted by Ryan's scent of blood. This puzzled Rhett immensely. However, the most important thing right now was to treat Ryan's infection. The doctor tried many detoxification methods with no results. She was becoming somewhat desperate, and was preparing to amputate Ryan's arm. But just then, Rhett noticed something unusual. By examining the cells in Ryan's arm, she found that the normal human tissue was transforming into a new type of biological tissue. It resembled cancer cells. It was simply incredible, because this was not poisoning. The doctor's detox methods were ineffective. In a moment, Rhett seemed to have a realization. She immediately extracted some saliva from the iguana's corpse. Then she examined it under a microscope. This iguana had mutated. Its saliva contained some components that could transform normal human cells into a different type of peculiar biological cell tissue. These cells possessed a robust vitality, comparable to the regenerative capabilities of cancer cells. Rhett couldn't help but ponder, if a person's entire body cells transformed into these special cells, could they achieve limb regeneration? Then she thought of other things. This type of mutated cell seemed to have never existed on Earth before. Connecting this to the photos of astronauts in the base, Rhett suddenly seemed to realize something. Perhaps what the Russians were studying back then was the incredible substance they brought back from space, which could transform human body cells into super regenerative cells. Then, considering the Russians chose to abandon this place later, Rhett speculated that the Russians likely had made some research progress, but it was highly uncontrollable. To figure out what had happened here, Rhett called in her assistant Noah to find a way to recover the formatted main computer. While Rhett was deeply focused on her research, Ryan's condition had become quite serious. His entire left arm was infected by those cells. The doctor couldn't handle the situation. She could only report the situation to John. After a moment of thought, John agreed to the doctor's treatment plan. Thus, she surgically amputated Ryan's mutated arm, then she placed it in the refrigerator. Shortly after John left the kitchen, reporter Lucia finally emerged. She went to the location where John had hidden the gem box, and stole the priceless gem inside. Then she put the box back in its original place. Lucia thought no one had noticed her theft, but she didn't know that, thousands of miles away in Spain, the mob boss had already received the signal that the gem box had been opened. He immediately ordered the pirate leader to head to the last known location of the gem box. At this moment, the group was unaware that danger was imminent. They were immersed in the joy of their new discoveries. Not long ago, the chef had accidentally discovered a warehouse. Inside were fragments of a space station. Through the investigation of the wreckage, the group discovered that these fragments were from a Russian space station named Mir, which had fallen over 20 years ago, according to records. The crash site of the space station was near Nemo Point now. This explained many things. The group realized that the strange markings on the nautical chart were likely the remnants of the space station. They learned that the space station had a satellite antenna for communication. The group speculated that if they found this wreckage, along with the equipment from the abandoned radio station, they might be able to contact the outside world. Thus, they immediately went to the marked locations on the nautical chart for further exploration. After several searches, they indeed found the antenna at one of the marked locations. However, just as the submersible was about to return, it was entangled by something. Influencer Lisa, seeing that her companions had not emerged for a long time, immediately informed the others. Seeking their help, Rhett took the lead to the target location. After all, among the group, she was the only one with diving experience. By the time Rhett arrived, alone, time had passed. The oxygen in the submersible was about to run out, and could only last for less than 15 minutes. Rhett put on her diving suit and plunged into the deep sea. After an unknown amount of time, she finally dived down to the location of the submersible, and found that an abandoned fishing net had trapped the submersible. Rhett took out her knife, intending to cut the net. However, the net was far more resilient than she had imagined. At this moment, her situation was also grim. On the shore, John and the others realized that the safe time had been exceeded. Without any hesitation, they immediately pulled the safety line, and needed to rescue Rhett from the sea. William and the others in the submersible were filled with despair upon seeing the situation, but the next second, Rhett actually cut the safety line. She returned to cut the fishing net again. Before the oxygen in the submersible ran out, she finally cut through the net. William and the others quickly ascended. Rhett followed closely behind. However, she was extremely exhausted now. Plus, she was severely hypoxic. Just halfway up, Rhett began to convulse uncontrollably. The people on shore were unaware of Rhett's condition below. They only saw a large number of bubbles rising to the surface. Just when they thought Rhett had perished, she emerged from the water. Seeing that Rhett was okay, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Immediately after, John and the others took Rhett back to the infirmary to check if she had any other injuries. At this moment, Noah came over with a computer. After his continuous efforts, he finally recovered some files. These were a series of photographs. In them, Russian researchers were clearly seen holding the iguana that the group had killed. Following that were some contents related to human experiments, which were chilling to behold. Meanwhile, on the other side of the island, Lucia kept causing trouble. After taking the gem, she came to Mark, who was imprisoned, and handed him a storage card. Lucia indicated that it would be handed over to the mob boss later. The boss would know what to do. Perhaps Lucia's identity was not as simple as it appeared. However, Lucia was clearly unaware that the mob boss had already been killed. With the signal antenna brought to the radio station, they could finally communicate with the outside world. Although the range was not large, it was sufficient to communicate with passing planes. They believed they would be able to leave soon. To celebrate this significant victory, the group held a bonfire party. However, during this time, someone secretly released Mark from confinement. If John had not been guarding the shore, no one would have noticed Mark's disappearance. John was extremely angry about the presence of a traitor within. He pointed his gun at the airboat, demanding Mark reveal who had let him out of the confinement room. Otherwise, he would blow up the airboat. Facing John's threat, Mark kept stalling for time. Then John was suddenly attacked. Lucia knocked him out on the spot. It was clear that she was the one who had released Mark. Just at this moment, an incident occurred at the radio station as well. The group had finally managed to spot a passing plane, and were preparing to send a distress signal to it. Suddenly, a crazy old man burst in, and without saying a word, he began to smash the signaling equipment with a metal rod. Although the group eventually subdued the mysterious old man, The equipment was damaged as a result. Who the old man was and where he came from remained a mystery. However, the bad situation didn't end there. After the amputation surgery, Ryan couldn't prevent the spread of the mutation virus. His left half was filled with a strange green substance, and since the surgery ended, he had been convulsing continuously. Companion Sal quickly called for the doctor. Regarding this situation, the doctor had never encountered anything like it before. All she could do was administer a sedative to Ryan, then she planned to observe him slowly. As the sedative was injected into Ryan's body, his heartbeat inexplicably stopped as well. Sal assumed the doctor was a murderer. He hurriedly reported the matter to Captain John. After much effort, he found the unconscious Captain John on the shore. Upon hearing of Ryan's death, John was clearly shocked. However, he forced himself to stay calm, and decided to investigate the situation thoroughly. Before making any decisions, soon after, John and Sal appeared before the doctor. Faced with their questioning, the doctor vehemently defended herself. She was very certain that she had used a safe dosage of the sedative. It was impossible for it to cause death. As for the reason behind it, she was uncertain at this point. The doctor intended to perform an autopsy on Ryan. This was indeed the only way to proceed at the moment. However, when the doctor returned to the morgue to prepare for Ryan's autopsy, she was horrified to find that Ryan's body was missing. Captain John was furious upon learning this news. He wouldn't tolerate anyone among the crew desecrating a corpse. John immediately gathered everyone together and demanded that they confess to the crime of stealing the body. He promised that if they confessed now, he wouldn't hold it against them. However, after a long time, no one in the crowd admitted to it. John grew even angrier. Suddenly, they noticed that the location where Ryan's body had been stored had a camera that could capture footage. As long as they found the monitoring room, they could identify the thief. However, after that, the group expended much effort, but couldn't find the monitoring room. This led them to doubt whether there was indeed a monitoring room. In the end, it was Noah who took action. He used his modified sonar device to scan the interior of the fortress. Finally, he found a hidden entrance in an inconspicuous spot. This was the room for the monitoring system. The group immediately played back the recordings on the screen, but it once again exceeded their expectations. Seeing this scene, the group was left in shock. This was completely beyond comprehension. At this time, someone suggested that perhaps the crazy old man they had captured might know some clues, so the group immediately interrogated the crazy old man. He spoke in Russian. Among those present, only Noah could understand him. Through his translation, they learned that the old man was a Russian naval expert. He appeared disheveled but was not actually insane. The group then asked the old man why he had damaged the communication antenna. However, the old man's response left the group somewhat confused. He claimed that it was arranged by people at sea to do so. However, it was clear that the old man didn't intend to explain anything to them. John and the others could not know what forces were at play at sea. Then the group inquired about what had happened to Ryan. The old man seemed to suddenly be triggered by something. He broke down emotionally and couldn't communicate normally. It was evident that it was a very painful past. In desperation, the group could only try to calm the old man first, then they planned to wait for him to calm down, before subtly inquiring about Ryan's situation. During this time, the group learned of the old man's hiding place. The reason they had not seen the old man in the fortress was because he had always lived in a secret chamber. The entrance was very concealed, hidden behind a wall in the bathroom. It required special techniques to push open to reveal the area behind. Under the old man's guidance, the group followed him through the passage behind the wall, finally arriving at a more spacious area. The old man claimed this was where he lived. Through discussions, they learned that the secret chamber had many entrances and exits, in addition to the one they had used. There were several others located outside the fortress. This allowed him to come and go easily. At the end of their conversation, they finally obtained a clue about Ryan from the old man. The old man insisted that they needed to deal with it quickly, otherwise, everyone would be in danger. Just after the old man finished speaking, the entire fortress suddenly plunged into darkness. They immediately thought of the missing Ryan. John and a few others went to check the situation near the circuit breaker. Sure enough, they saw signs of vandalism, and also found several leftover blood bags on the ground. They seemed to have thought of something, and immediately returned to the infirmary. Meanwhile, the long-missing Ryan quietly appeared in the infirmary. During this time, he had undergone severe mutation. Although his left arm had grown back, it looked more like a lizard's arm. He was now filled with a thirst for blood. He rushed towards the freezer without any sense of reason, and gulped down that blood. Soon, Sal, who was guarding the infirmary, discovered Ryan's trace. She had not heard the old man's words, so she was unaware of the danger Ryan posed. Sal approached and hugged Ryan. Perhaps he had not fully mutated, so he didn't attack Sal. However, John and the others arrived shortly after with tranquilizer guns. For some reason, the tranquilizer was completely ineffective on Ryan. John reacted quickly, drawing his handgun, ready to shoot Ryan, but Sal stood in front of John. The mutated Ryan seized the moment to escape the scene quickly. John was furious at Sal's actions. He decided to put her in the confinement room. Then he discussed with the others how to deal with Ryan. John naturally advocated for eliminating him. However, the doctor and others had differing opinions. They believed Ryan had significant research value. Perhaps they could capture him alive, to study and develop a drug for limb regeneration. John felt helpless regarding the naive ideas of the doctor and others. If it were really as simple as the doctor suggested, why would the Russians have given up? With John's insistence, the group took up their weapons again to search for Ryan, and prepared to kill him completely. Considering his formidable strength, John planned to take Sal with him. Unexpectedly, this guy was still so stubborn. He believed that Ryan posed no threat, and even took advantage of John's inattention to knock him out. He seized his weapon. It was only when the chef came to check that he discovered the unconscious John. Even after being knocked out by Sal, John was still very concerned about his assistant's safety. He hurriedly led the group to search for her, but they were still a step too late. The completely mutated Ryan had lost all reason. Upon seeing John and the others in full gear, Ryan decisively abandoned Sal and quickly fled. Given what had happened before, the group understood very well the consequences of being infected by that mutation virus. Out of respect for their past companionship, John left a handgun behind for Sal to end her own life. With the sound of a gunshot, the group fell silent. After a moment, they adjusted their emotions again, to prepare to recover and bury their companion's body, but they found only a pool of dragged blood on the ground. Following the trail, the group tracked it to an area outside the fortress. Looking at the sea before them, the group already guessed the outcome. In this encounter with the lizardmen, John and the others had been completely defeated. Just as the group's spirits were low, one of the companions discovered a ship passing by on the sea. Perhaps they could use this opportunity to escape. Upon hearing this news, John and the others hurried to the shore. They prepared to use a flare gun to signal the vessel, but the next second, he suddenly stopped, because they discovered that there were pirates on that ship, and the leader of the gang, the mob boss, was also on the ship. John didn't understand why they were still harassing them. In John's memory, the photographer Mark had already left the island on a hovercraft with the gem box. The mob boss actually knew this as well. In fact, the escaped Mark was on his ship. However, the gem box was empty. The mob boss informed the people on the island of the situation through a broadcast. He stated that he had come solely for the gem. As long as Lucia handed it over willingly, he wouldn't trouble them. At this moment, John and the others realized that the gem had been stolen by the reporter Lucia. The group urged her to return the gem immediately, but Lucia refused, saying she had her own plans. In Lucia's plan, she intended to use the gem as leverage, to have the mob boss send her back to her hometown in New Zealand. Then she would reveal the gem's hiding place on the island. If the negotiation went smoothly, she could even get everyone else out as well. Lucia was very pleased with her perfect plan. However, Captain John thought she was foolishly naive to trust a mob boss. He could easily control Lucia on the ship, then continuously torment her, ultimately obtaining the gem's whereabouts. John believed they should take their fate into their own hands. Soon after, he agreed to the mob boss's request to talk with Lucia. However, it would be others impersonating her. According to John's plan, he and his companions would directly ambush and seize the mob boss. This way, they could threaten him to send them back home. John's plan sounded indeed good. At the beginning of the execution, there were no major issues. He and his companions successfully captured the mob boss and his right-hand woman, Jean. However, John didn't anticipate that the mob boss was very tough. He ordered his men to aim at them. Such a reckless stance made even John feel troubled. Ultimately, he chose to compromise. John and his companions were all captured by the mob boss. Moreover, due to their actions, the mob boss immediately ordered his men to board the island and take control of the others as well. Moments later, the mob boss's men found the imprisoned Lucia in the confinement room. Before the gang members could interrogate or torment her, then Lucia took the initiative to show weakness, and expressed her willingness to return the gem to the boss of the gang. Under the watchful eye of the mob boss's right-hand man, Lucia arrived at the beach. She searched continuously in a secluded corner. However, after a long time, she still couldn't find the gem. The right-hand man was clearly growing impatient. He drew his handgun and aimed it at Lucia's head. Faced with the threat, Lucia was close to tears. She could only take out the photo she had taken earlier, proving that it was indeed buried at this location, but for some reason, it had suddenly disappeared. The right-hand man immediately reported this situation to the mob boss. Perhaps feeling like he had been toyed with like a monkey, the mob boss killed the chef to warn everyone. He then continued to interrogate them about the gem's whereabouts. Seeing that no one was answering, the mob boss raised his gun again, prepared to kill. At this critical moment, the biologist Red suddenly stood up and claimed she knew where it was. The mob boss didn't believe she would dare to play tricks. He immediately led 2 of his men to take Red to search for the gem's trace, but in reality, Red had no idea where the gem was. She only thought of a way to kill these people. Red led the 3 of them to the passage where Ryan had attacked Sal. Then, taking advantage of their inattention, she cut her palm and smeared blood on the wall. The metallic scent was not strong, so the mob boss and his men couldn't detect it. However, Ryan was very perceptive. He quietly appeared behind the group. With the screams echoing in the darkness, the mob boss was terrified to find that both of his men were dead. The mob boss was also intimidated by the monster. He hurriedly dragged Rhett into a room, asking how to deal with that monster. However, with Rhett as a guiding light, the mutated Ryan quickly found their hiding spot and pounced on the mob boss. Shortly after, this once mighty mob boss became Ryan's meal. At this point, only Rhett was left in the room. Ryan wouldn't let go of the meal within reach. As he prepared to attack Rhett, suddenly, the other party pulled out a white egg. It was the lizard egg from the cave earlier. Ryan seemed very concerned for the egg's safety. He actually stopped his attack, but Rhett couldn't leave in front of him either. At this moment, William and the others arrived, fully armed. The lizard man Ryan immediately fled the room, but with their previous experience, John and the others were already prepared. The bullets hit Ryan's body with precision. Then, using the Molotov cocktails they had prepared, they completely eliminated the mutated Ryan. Later, through communication, after Rhett had left, the influencer Lisa had used her looks to seduce one of the guards. Then, while he was distracted, she stole the guard's knife. Only then did the group manage to free themselves. They then launched a sneak attack on the guards. After a fierce battle, they finally subdued the guards. However, John was injured in the process, so William led the team to rescue Rhett. With the mob boss and his men completely eliminated, the group thought the ordeal was finally over. They first buried the deceased chef, and then planned to leave the deserted island on the mob boss's boat. An unexpected event occurred again. Noah finally revealed his true colors. He snatched a lizard egg and escaped the island alone by boat. John and the others realized it too late. At this moment, the situation took another turn. The mob boss's ship suddenly exploded. Noah and the lizard egg were consumed in the flames, and the one responsible for all this was the disheveled old man. The group had never imagined that the cannon could still be operational. However, now, although they had thwarted Noah's scheme, the only boat had been completely destroyed. The group was once again filled with despair. The biologist Red wandered into the sea, perhaps to recover her assistant's body. However, at this moment, a blue creature suddenly emerged from the sea. Red immediately recognized it. Its voice was exactly the same as that recorded before the research vessel sank. It was clear that their being trapped here was also due to this creature. However, for some reason, the blue creature didn't harm Rhett. It simply took her back to the shore. At this moment, everyone finally understood that this creature was the people at sea mentioned by the disheveled old man. The film ended here. Nemo Point was released this March. The film tells the story from a fantastical perspective, highlighting the importance of protecting the ocean. It is indeed quite innovative. However, the film's early setup for clues made it appear very chaotic. As a low-budget film, it may not stand out, but it has reached a passing mark. If you enjoy my channel, please subscribe to my channel.